Make it stick. Another day, another dollar. Let's jump into Anki. See what flashcards we got. 3 of them. 3 damn. What are the 8 sections of Chapter 3 Mix Up Your Practice? The myth of mass practice, space practice, interleaved practice, varied practice, developing discrimination skills, improving complex mastery for medical students. These principles are broadly applicable. The takeaway. There we go. What are the 6 sections of Chapter 2 to learn retrieve? Reflection is a form of practice, the testing effect, studying the testing effect in the lab, studying the testing effect in the wild, exploring nuances, the takeaway. What's up? What are the 14 claims the authors make it stick? Oh, not this one. Okay, here we go. There's a direct relationship between the effort of retrieval and the amount of learning that takes place. We're often poor judges of when we're learning, meaning, we're often poor judges of when we're learning. We think we're learning a lot, we're often not. When we think we're not, we're learning that much, we often are, if we're using effective learning techniques. So we're just poor general judges of when we're learning. Mass practice and rereading are among the most widely used study techniques across disciplines, yet evidence does not support them to be effective study techniques. Retrieval practice is more effective than mass practice, more effective than rereading, more effective than reviewing notes. As a learning technique. Spaced and relieved retrievals lead to more difficult retrievals that feel less productive, but in reality, they actually lead to more learning based on the stuff we've already mentioned about poor judges, direct relationship, etc. Attempting to do something, or perform a skill, recall something before you're actually taught the thing leads to better learning, better consolidation of the material once you do learn it, or once you are taught it. Okay. There's no evidence to support that sticking with one's preferred learning style, that whether it's visual, auditory, etc., sticking with one modality, your preferred learning style, leads to more learning. That's not supported by evidence. What is supported by evidence, though, is going broad, getting lots of different modalities, different techniques, different resources for a subject. 8, the ability to discriminate between closely related things. Discrimination skills are skills that can be developed through interleaved and varied practice, and this leads to an increased ability to recognize commonalities and differences among closely related things, things you know and things you haven't even studied yet. 9, there's no known limit to how much we can learn if we use elaboration. 10, hold on, actually we'll make that 10. What was 9 then? We're all susceptible to illusions of knowing, thinking we have more skill than we do, knowing things we don't, and testing is a great way to calibrate an accurate assessment of what we actually know and what we don't know. All learning requires previous learning. The more information you have to connect new information to, the better, the faster the learning is. Meaning, if you have a ton of knowledge, you're a master of, say, Mesopotamian history, well, then learning a new fact about Mesopotamian history is much more likely to just stick and slot into connect to something you already knew. It makes sense, and then you remember it. Versus if you have no knowledge of that, nothing to connect it to. That's also why analogies are powerful. 13. A characteristic of deep expertise and mastery is the ability to extract the underlying principles and main patterns of some resource, develop a mental model from it, and then connect that mental model to other mental models you have. Finally, learning changes the brain physically. We can become smarter. That is all 14, baby. Wow. We've done it. Next time we'll see this in 26 days. We'll see if we got it then. That's Anki for the day. What did we read about yesterday? What did we learn from the book? Well, I know there was some stuff about failure and beliefs about failure, right? I think it was all within the section of failure and the myth of errorless learning. So we've already talked about B.F. Skinner, we've already talked about errorless learning, the myth of it. So I know we read about this French study done in France on 6th graders who, right, and this all revolves around the idea of fear of failure poisoning, has the potential to poison learning. But so 6th graders in France, right, they're given these very tough anagram problems and they just sat there struggling for 10 minutes. Or I don't remember actually, I think it was only 10 minutes, right? Then one group is told after these 10 minutes of struggling, they're given a lesson on how failure is crucial for learning. Mistakes and errors, these are crucial for learning and they're very natural. And that with practice, you'll make less and less errors, so it can actually help improve upon your mistakes and make less of them. But it's a completely natural thing and it's crucial for learning. The other group was just basically asked what was their strategy for solving the anagram problems. After this lesson and the question for the two different groups, they're both given an exam to test working memory capacity. The group that was given the lesson on how mistakes and errors are a crucial part of learning, critical, you cannot learn without failures and mistakes. This group showed significantly better results on working memory exam. And working memory basically is how much you can hold in mind at once. It's highly correlated with IQ. So the idea that just reframing how they thought about their errors and mistakes could have such a drastic implication on their working memory. It's almost like they got an IQ boost. That's how powerful it is. And why is this? Well, because the idea is that having a fear of failure and trying to avoid mistakes is something that leads to wasting portions of your working memory on worrying and trying to like overanalyze yourself. Are you doing good? Are you doing bad? What's going on? Oh, this is so difficult. Stuff like that doesn't help you actually perform at all. It wastes this memory performance during working memory capacity during performance instead of just actually using that working memory capacity on solving the problems or doing whatever, performing the thing. So, yeah, fear of failure can lead to worse utilization of working memory during performance, but the inverse is also true, that embracing failure and not trying to avoid it and seeing it as a critical part of the learning journey on the path of mastery leads to better utilization of working memory during performance and can boost performance in comparison. So that's it's all about fear of failure being kind of like poison to learning. It can hinder learning, slow down learning, weaken performance. There's more in there, I think, about failure, but I think that's pretty good. Okay, so we got the study that was well recited, recalled. Right, okay, so there's this myth about corrective feedback. Or not corrective feedback, errors. We think like, oh, you're going to wire these errors into your muscle memory, or when you make these errors, that's what you're going to remember. There's no evidence that when you make errors, that's what you remember. In fact, when you're giving corrective feedback, you do not remember the errors. It's not what is remembered. So that's been shown in studies. In fact, strategies that employ rapid and lots of errors lead to deeper learning. We've already explored these modalities of how effort and failure, mistakes. Actually, I don't know if we've explored that, but basically they're just kind of saying more errors leads to more learning. Maybe assuming you're giving corrective feedback, maybe not. But errors are critical lessons on the path to mastery. And it leads to taking on harder challenges, more learning. Okay, so I don't know. Yeah, this is not a great recall. Not a great recall. I got the general idea, but a lot of these details I forgot. Fear of failure can, weaken, poison learning, because of this working memory thing, but also because it keeps people from the experimentation that's needed for learning, the risk taking, the lessons that come from those things, taking on challenges. Fear of failure is going to keep you from experimenting. It's going to keep you from taking on challenges. It's going to keep you from persisting through it. So I think that's most of it. It's a lot of this idea of mindset from Carol Dweck. Oh, here, if you look at that, this next paragraph is actually going to talk about Carol Dweck. This rhymes just like with what Carol Dweck is all about. Mindset, her work is a lot about how you view failure. Okay. Mistakes and failure. Let's get back into reading and I'll be back to recall in a bit. All right, guys, that's the section complete on failure and the myth of errorless learning. So much in there, and not everything I agree with, but we'll get into that. So, first of all, what do we take away here? You gotta try. Failure is not the end of the road. It's a turning point in the road. Okay, well, let's just recall everything I can. They talked about Carol Dweck and her research, which really stems from how you identify or how you view intelligence and talent. If you believe that intelligence and talent are fixed, they're basically genetic, you can't change them, well, then you're going to avoid taking on challenges. And you're really going to stunt your learning because failure is seen as something to show you, it's evidence that you have less intelligence, less talent than you thought you did. Versus if you have a growth mindset where you see that intelligence and talent can be grown through effort, guidance, and strategy, well, then those people are going to take on more challenges. They're going to experiment. They're going to try new things. They're going to keep persevering in the face of failure, which Edison said was the key to success, perseverance in the face of failure. And I think that is there's something profound to that idea that I've been trying to articulate. What makes someone successful? Well, you have to define what success is, first of all. What is it to be successful? That's like a mathematical proof you've been working on. First, you've got to define the key question. What's the key question? Well, you're saying, basically, you're making the argument mathematically. If you persevere in the face of failure, then you will succeed. The first thing to prove that is say, what's the hypothesis? The hypothesis is if you persevere in the face of failure. The conclusion is you succeed. You can assume the hypothesis is true. So what we have to prove that the whole statement is true by saying that you will succeed. That's true. Well, the first step would be, what is success? How do you define success? But I think you can almost define it. It's like a self-defining. Perseverance in the face of failure is the definition of success, potentially. Anyway, we're getting deep in the weeds here. Let's keep going. We learned about this thing called the Festival of Errors, which came about after the French study in France. They said we need to teach, the youth, the students, the culture about how errors and mistakes and failures are completely natural and completely necessary to learning. And it's what led to the great discoveries and advancements in French history, scientifically and technologically, and that their culture needs to go back to that, or it should, so that it can, as a culture, stop stunting their growth and embrace more learning and growth and progress. And then similarly, there's FailCon in Silicon Valley for tech entrepreneurs and venture capitalists, coming together once a year and discussing about what failures they've encountered in the past year that have been crucial for their advancement and learning. So much about failure and mistakes, and Edison saying it's the failure is inspiration. It's showing you all the ways you can't do it, or it's not showing you can't. It's showing you a way not to do it. So you've learned more, you've gained more through the experience, learning. They talked about Steve Jobs saying when he got fired from Apple, how that led to him being able to be free and light and experiment and be one of the most creative periods of his life. So much about this stuff, science, and how failures and mistakes in science have led to all the progress that's built into the scientific method. So much great stuff. Anders Ericsson, whose book I have as well, which I will surely read at some point. I believe it's called Peak, which actually was a great call out from them. Yep. Because this is another great book to read for me to add to the list. The next few books I'm planning to read are on this channel after Make It Stick are Mindsets in there, Peak, and then I guess it's over on my other shelf, Thinking Fast and Slow. So those are really heavy hitters for cognitive psychology and for psychology in general. But yeah, I think that's everything from what I just read. They said, this is where I didn't fully agree. They said it's not the failure that's desirable, which I didn't even fully agree. I think that the effort of, not the effort, the signal to your brain of a failure or a mistake is actually leads to release of neurotransmitters that lead to brain change and neuroplasticity. So I don't fully agree with that. These guys are not neuroscientists. Make that clear. And this book was written probably 10 years ago, before we had a lot of so much modern research from neuroscience on learning has come out in the last couple years. My university actually just came out this coming semester with their first class on the neuroscience of learning. So I kind of really want to take that class, but it's an early class. I don't want to wake up at 7:30, or it's a 7:30 class, so I'd have to wake up earlier than that, 6:30. I wake up at like 8:30, so that's just not gonna be really possible. But yeah, I would love to take that class maybe in the future if I'm still in school. But they say it's not the failure that's desirable. I don't fully agree. I don't think the neuroscience research fully agrees, but they said it's the effort in face of the risk anyway. You do that dauntless, that strong effort, regardless, or in spite of, not even in spite of, in acknowledgement of the risk, you still persevere and put in effort. It's the learning what works and what doesn't work that only failure can sometimes teach, and it's basically, there's one more thing. I'm forgetting it, but I also have a note on Anders Ericsson's basically research that it takes thousands of hours of deliberate practice, which is practice in which you're trying to beat your current level, beat your current skill level, which failure is a perfect, it's critical in that. Learning from failures, because failures are what are inhibiting you from getting to that next level. Okay, and then it's trying. It's the idea that attempting leads more learning than being spoon-fed the solution, which is it's so interesting because it's all nuance, it's all spectrums, it's all like so nuanced, because it's like, well then almost it's like, well, maybe I shouldn't even be reading this book then in that case, because I'm getting spoon-fed all this research. I don't have to figure out this stuff through my own experience. That's the thing. It's like, okay, how far does this logical statement go to? So I think a little bit of attempting is probably the best. Not getting spoon-fed completely, but not like you can spend your whole lifetime, if you live lucky enough to live 50 years of conscious life, 60 years or more or less, you You could struggle your whole life to try and figure this stuff out, and you would never figure this stuff out. Maybe you figure out better stuff, actually. Who knows? Who knows? That's just something to think about. So Andrew Erickson's right. Okay, sign of effort and good. Mistakes and failure are signs of effort. Not all difficulties are desirable. For an example, undesirable difficulty is test anxiety, right? Doesn't lead to more learning, even though it makes it more difficult. Okay, I'm going to make a note. Answer what last section was about. So tomorrow we'll answer what was this section about. Failure and the myth of errorless learning. All right. Breaking new ground, as always. Page 94 now. 7 pages left in chapter 4. I can't believe it. We're like, it feels so good to be in new ground that I've never read before. This is all new information. I love it. So that's it for today. I'll talk to you later. See ya.